I'm here to proclaim that the MLD eVent bivvy is the best bivvy in the world. If anyone has a better bivvy, challenge it. I will explain why I think the MLD eVent bivvy is the best bivvy in the world. First of all, it's very, very lightweight.
400 grams.
That is how light this is. I went for the large because I like to have space. Now, if you've seen my previous videos using this, and there are several, then you will know that I have in the past put a full sized mat in here plus a sleeping bag. Now, I probably wouldn't do that in the winter because that might compress your sleeping bag, but I say might. This thing is pretty spacious, so you might even be okay. But obviously, you know, for safety and not compression, I would suggest that you use a warm, thin mat. What I've used is a Therm Prolite, and of course this has foam inside it and is quite thin. And Therm obviously do a warmer mat that's very similar to this, that would give you more warmth. And to save space inside, what you can do, quite obviously, or put your bivvy on top of 1-2 mats here to give extra insulation. So basically, this thin one here, I've just run the 3/4 length of the bivvy, and this one here is just 5 pieces of XLite, and literally is where my torso and hips go. You know, just a little more comfort, especially this time of the year because it's August, so it's not exactly, you know, not exactly freezing cold. And this mat is not very thick. So I just wanted some extra comfort, you know, from the ground. So it was more of a comfort thing. But in the winter, it certainly would be worthwhile, you know, putting something like that underneath if you're using a Prolite type of mat, just to give it that little bit of extra insulation. Now, we will just make a few caveats here. Obviously, you know, I'm not an explorer. I'm not an expert. I've not tried and tested or even used any other bivvies. Yes, I'm a fanboy of MLD, obviously, have been for 10 odd years. Pretty much exclusively use their stuff. And yes, of course, I get it the same way that you all do. Have to wait bloody ages for it to arrive in the post. Seal nylon base, which is very thin and light. Now, I don't use stupid footprints or anything, but I do double up my foam mat, which basically acts as a footprint, I suppose you could argue. You have obviously eVent over the entire top. You have quite good walls each side. I'd say maybe around about 4 inches. So you have protection from the ground. Obviously, I will just mention one thing here. Whilst MLD might offer a sealing service, no crying that you have to pay extra for sealing, and no crying if you've got to do it yourself. You know, if I can do it, it's dead easy. And basically you just get your tube and you just put a little bit, very small amount, along the line, and then just rub it into the stitching good and proper. And you know, I sealed this myself and it works perfectly well. Now the entire foot, and I'm sure there is a reason, I think it's to do with condensation or something, and breathability, but the entire foot
13 inches, 33 centimeters.
is eVent. So basically the sil nylon finishes on the ground, so there isn't a bathtub at the back at all. Basically the sil nylon finishes ground level, and then the eVent is this entire panel here. So you have an entire back panel that is of breathable eVent material. You do get these little tassel things here, one here and one here, which I can never really quite work out, but I've since discovered I believe they're for hanging it up to dry, not for pegging it out. I like to use a shelter over the head end of this, especially if the weather's going to be slightly inclement, because as you can see, I like to spread myself out. Now, unless you're very small, and I'm 5'8", I would recommend going for large. I just think it gives more flexibility, you know, and options of use. But if you're a woman, dainty woman, or a little midget, then maybe you would get away with the small one. If you're only going to be camping in the summer and you just want to use a thin mat, realistically I'm only going to be camping in the spring, summer, autumn with this as well. I wouldn't be doing this. I'm not brave enough to do this in the winter. Then, you know, you might get away with the small, but I just think that generally speaking, you know, comfort comes first. Now, the first night that I got here, it was quite wet and the entire cover was soaked. I used it a couple of years ago or a year ago, and it got soaked and puddles were forming on it, and nothing, no rain, no moisture, nothing got past it. It really is very, very waterproof, and there was little to no condensation. There was maybe, like, you could just feel some condensation on the top of the quilt that I've got with this, but there was no moisture on the underside of the eVent material, none. Admittedly, I'm using it in relatively benign conditions, so if you were to be using it in very, very cold weather, you know, very wet, prolonged weather, now that might challenge it more, but it's still going to be better than anything else, I will wager. The other thing that is super brilliant with this, I don't think this can be overstated, to be honest. You get a 3/4 length zip. Getting in and out of this is unbelievably easier, and I'll bet there's nothing out there that's lighter, more breathable, more spacious and easier to get in and out. I'm going to do this zip up here. What I used to do in the early days, hook that up there so that it's raised up. Now, I used to do that. In fact, if you look at my, do you take your lawful beloved dog to be your doglet? Yeah, I'll take my doglet. I'll have the doglet. Doglet, yeah, I'll marry the doglet. So, what I used to do was tie this up. Let me take my hat off a minute. I used to tie this up, but I don't know whether it's laziness or whether it's just not completely necessary now. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, what I tend to do now is I tend to do this zip up here. Now, I will say I haven't actually slept. Hello, you still there? I haven't actually slept in this in pouring rain, you know, completely done up, because I've always had, and then this is the mesh part here, I think you can see here, and then, oops, hello, and then that goes up there, ouch, ow, foot caught or something, and then that does there. Now when you're, oh God, I feel like I'm in a Spitfire cockpit now. Broadsword calling Danny boy, broadsword calling Danny boy, do you copy? Broadsword, yeah, we're under attack, send anyway. I could no way. Everyone's turned off by now anyway. So you can see that when you're done up, oop, now Ron, the Velcro's, I might have to get another one of these without the bloody Velcro on it. The Velcro of the sleeping bag's attacking me. Now, I'm not saying that you can, you know, I'm not saying that you can sit up, but you certainly have enough room to, you know, to lean on an elbow. You can't really see it, but you know, I am, you know, hello, I am kind of, hang on, if I put that down there, excuse me, the trouble with this kind of narrow, this wide angle thing, it makes me look fatter than I really am. I'm not that fat. But you know, and hopefully you haven't got a view of my cock. might get some of the girls excited. So, you know, you've got a significant amount of room in here, and you know, this is on a thin, you know, Pro-Lite type of mat. I mean, it's, you know, it's spacious beyond words. If you put a tarp over the top, and then you can leave obviously this here, because this gives, you know, it's this that's giving the extra room. When you do it up, you know, for bad weather, and of course it's just absolutely typical, isn't it? The one time then the sun starts to come out here in cloudy, sunny Wales is when I decide to do this up and completely cocoon myself, you know. And you still have, you know, enough room to be a complete and utter buffoon, you know, without any real worries at all. You know, you've got plenty of buffoonery space in here. I still have enough room to lean on my arm in here, you know. So what I'm trying to get at is if you really wanted to sit up in here, even when it's done up completely, you can. You know, I'm not saying that you've got, I'm not saying that you have a lot of headroom. You don't, but you definitely have, you know, for a tight bivvy, enough headroom. And obviously the less stuff you have under you, that's why a thin Pro-Lite type mat, and then put all your foam mats outside. So you could, in theory, sit up like this, and rather than be recording nonsense for YouTube, you could be doing something productive, like, you know, watching me on YouTube in your bivvy or something like that, if you had a signal. So, you know, you have enough room in here, and it's surprisingly cozy. It's not too claustrophobic because you have enough room that you can sit up in.
I mean on your elbow like this.
I'm starting to feel a little bit claustrophobic, so I think I'll be quite glad to get out in a minute. But I think I'm partly getting claustrophobic because of the warmth as well. I don't think that's helping. And I think if it was cool, if it was raining and it was cool, I don't think I'd be too claustrophobic. I don't think. But it's, you know, it's surprisingly spacious. And then let me see if I can angle. That's the amount of, you know, I just want to get all the girls excited, but that's as much, you know, I can spread my legs, you know, quite wide. You know, in here, you know, there's plenty of, you know, there's plenty of room down there. you could do your leg exercises. Look, 1 2 1 2 1 2. Oh god, there's no hope. Only I could turn a review thing of something like this into utter buffoonery and about 20 odd minutes. It's why nobody is it's why nobody ever sends me anything, because they know that I'd completely and utterly hash everything up. Jiggle these zips, and then if you do it up like that, good and proper, you now have just that tiny pinprick of a hole there. Like I said, you know, look how much I can still, and I don't bother pegging it out now either, which I used to. If you pegged it out, you might not be able to sit up quite so much. So I think you're just as well off just not pegging it, but you know, you could if you wanted to. Anyway, I think I've shown enough of my insides. And then obviously when it's time to, you know, finish, then you just, can you see? You just, I'm afraid we don't do all this fancy editing so often on this channel. I can't be bothered with that. I think that's why everybody turns off, because all the proper channels, they do all this fancy Steven Spielberg editing. When you're finished, you've got plenty of room here, and of course you can show off with your super long zip there, and it's just, you know, an absolutely fantastic, fabulous bivvy. Welcome to the MLD. Welcome to the fabulous, fantastic, world's best bivvy, the MLD eVent bivvy. Shame you had to put up with me for 20 odd minutes, but can't have everything, can you? Best bivvy, worst YouTuber on earth. I'll see you in the next one.